Okay, welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys. I am one half of the host, Joel, and the other half is called...
Booker.
And this week we are going to
No, I was lying, it's Brian. Hi, how are you?
No backsies. You are now Booker the cat.
Booker the cat, okay.
And Brian is now my pet. And we're in a topsy-turvy, bizarro world.
Is this thing you're doing, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, is that just your new weekly thing, or...
You know, I like it.
Okay.
I like it because I find that I've been thinking a lot over the last few days about natural ways to address people, because I was working with a large group of people over the last few days, and I find that I often slip into calling everyone "hey guys," which is casual but also like obviously really gendered.
I'm never sure about that. I mean, I think that people understand it to not be gendered ultimately, though it has a gendered origin, so I'm always confused, and I hate saying folks.
Well, see, I think that people probably interpret it as not gendered, but then that sounds like something obviously I would think, because it's not going to affect me. So I am aware of that. I do say folks quite a bit. I know it comes across a bit Midwestern.
You know what it comes across as?
What's that?
A bit folksy.
A little bit folksy, but it's the best alternative I have that applies in kind of professional settings. Anyway, I was thinking about it, and I don't know. I think it's nice.
It is nice,
and I lean on it. So yes, that's officially a thing I say now.
Oh, good.
Because it's an easy way to well, obviously, because the start of this episode has been so easy.
Yeah.
That it's an easy way to enter into the dialogue. So this week we are going to be talking about the episode "The Dark Age," from season 2 of Buffy The Vampire Slayer, and this is written and directed by.
It is written by Dean Batali and Rob Deshotel, who also wrote Never Kill a Boy on the First Date and The Puppet Show and a few other things. They kind of finish up their writing generally by season 2, the end of season 2, and it was directed by Bruce Seth Green. First aired on November the 10th, 1997.
Why do I know the name Bruce Seth Green other than Seth Green being part of it?
He has directed, I'd say, 50% of the episodes of the show so far.
Okay, that would do it.
Yeah. So one of the things that this episode specifically has going for it, in a bad way, in my opinion, is that you were telling me that it actually does occur, or it crops up in the comic books in season 8 and stuff afterwards, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten that far myself yet, but I am aware that it's something that they do quite a lot in the comics, is mine previous villains and previous concepts and expand on them, which can often be a good thing in comics continuity, and sometimes can be a bit repetitive. But yeah, so this episode is very much about Giles' backstory, him growing up as a wild hellion of a warlock in 1970s London.
Yeah, I think so.
And the comics mine that a lot and bring back the villain from this episode, Igong, and his various compatriots. And it's most, I suppose, its strongest comic allusions, and something which is off debated about how intentional it was intended to be in this part of Giles' backstory, but it draws a lot of parallels with Hellblazer, with John Constantine.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And that kind of strong tradition in the kind of the Constantine model of the scruffy magician Kongman, the dirty back alley magics of London, and
punk background.
Punk, absolutely. His John Constantine's punk band he was in when he was a young warlock was Mucus Membrane.
I feel like I knew that somehow. Anyway.
So there was a real life band that came together to produce what is supposedly the one single that John Constantine's band released, which was called Venus of the Hard Cell.
Of course, okay. Hard Cell, CELL or SELL?
SELL.
Okay, cool.
And we'll get into it in terms of when we kind of summarise what this episode is about. But John Constantine's origin story that drives a lot of his first issues and is constantly revisited is when he was a cocky young magician. Him and his friends thought that he could exorcise and save a young girl by essentially summoning a more powerful demon to get rid of the demon that was, harassing. She was like being abused by her gangster father or whatever. It goes horribly wrong. The girl is actually torn apart and brought to hell, basically.
As you do.
And most of his friends are traumatized, and in the modern day, in the first couple of arcs, they haven't spoken in 20 years and are eventually picked off because this demon is coming back. But what you find out as Hellblazer goes on is that the reason why there's a period of John Constantine's life that's missing isn't because of anything mystical or interesting, is that he was committed to an insane asylum.
Yeah. Because
he essentially killed this girl, and by being over ambitious about it.
When one of the things I was reading about, because I did a quick Google search about Giles and Constantine. John Constantine. I don't want to get too closely associated with the Keanu Reeves adaptation or the more recent TV show, both of which, by all accounts, seem total trash. But, well, no, I know the movie is trash. I've seen it a couple of times. There weren't too many people drawing the connection, weirdly enough. And I've always thought it to be a very, very clear connection. And what's odd, it might be a moment of synchronicity because, like, Constantine started around, Hellblazer started around 1993, and this would have been 97. So was that established?
It definitely would have been out there, and it could have been something that the writers could have been exposed to. But it's also just, I think that a lot of this, in terms of the occult background, draws on a similar English ghost story kind of tradition, and there are points of differences and points of differentiation. So Giles goes on to be very straight-laced, which never happens to John Constantine. The problem is that he never actually grows up. He just becomes a more schlubby version of the magician. But it's always been an interesting connection because I've read literally every issue of Hellblazer that was releasing his 30 years of its original run, and it's a very core part of my understanding of horror and of occultism. So I've always liked how it's reflected in Giles, and I think he does a very good expression of that anger and that attempt to reclaim a normal life. Because what happens to John Constantine regularly is he does often have the opportunity to retire and keeps getting pulled back into it and keeps getting his life exposed in these kind of situations. So there's definitely illusions there, and I think that in terms of this episode is very fundamental in terms of that Giles archetype. But what I think we probably do, it'd probably be a good time to actually give us a Buffy Ann summary of what happened in the episode. Great.
Buffy Ann summary for this week. I read this earlier just to see if I could get my mouth around it, and it didn't work that great, so let's find out. When young... no, I've already gotten it wrong. When young, Giles, Ethan and friends raised the demon Igon, possession by whom is a sexual high, and had to exorcise him. Igon returns seeking revenge. Ethan tattoos Buffy with Igon's mark while Igon possesses Jenny. Igon is tricked into possessing Angel, whose own demon expels him. Jenny, by now in love with Giles, is alienated from him. It's not great.
But I think it hits on all the main points. Our main thing here being that this is a return for our Halloween debonair fae villain, Ethan Rayne. And
evil
bisexual as they tend to be, and an opportunity to kind of deepen our understanding of Giles and in terms of what brought him to be a Watcher and his relationship with Jenny, which has really kind of struck me as a much more like in-depth thing in season 2 than I remember it being. Like, obviously it's there, but they really do try to create a lot of character moments for Jenny and for Giles.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember watching Passions for the first time, which is the episode in season 2 where Jenny calendared, and like, it was shocking when I was younger. I was just like, oh my god, how did they do this? Because she's an actual main character with proper established personality and relationships, and I was horrified by it, because she's well established, and she's a nicer fringe in this episode too, so it makes it even worse.
She does. Yeah, so this is all very pre Game of Thrones and pre that kind of shock factor of, when you kill someone, it really meant something,
I'm trying to think of the other TV shows that do that reasonably well from this time period would be Oz. That they did that quite well. In Oz, I think maybe 5 characters survived the whole 5 seasons kind of thing. And Sopranos, they kill quite a lot of characters, and the other one obviously would be The Wire, which obviously comes a couple of years after this, but The Wire does consistently kill off characters in a pretty final way, which is pretty cool.
So what's your gut feeling on the episode?
My gut feeling on the episode, I liked it well enough. I think it was definitely more your kind of style of an episode than mine, but it deepened Giles' character. It was the Giles episode so far, which I quite like. I like a good character-centered episode. I think it gave a good reflection on Buffy's journey kind of thing, and I think it gave Willow a moment to shine as well, which is always great. But I thought it was quite interesting in the way that Giles kind of expresses his own version of the destiny-wrenching kind of moment. When Buffy decided in Prophecy Girl to stick with it and to sacrifice herself, Giles rejected that in the same way that in the last episode, what's his name? Billy Fordham decided to reject it.
Yeah.
So Giles also rejected it. And that's in keeping with how he's characterized for the rest of the show. He's a little bit of a paladin, but he's also ready to kill people if he has to, and he does.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when in the last scene of the last episode, Lie to Me, when Buffy says, lie to me, and he tells her the great speech, and she says in the closing, liar, that kind of reflects on this episode too. this is the episode where Giles lies to Buffy extensively and shows that he has been lying the whole time.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot about sowing these seeds of the dissolution of the totemic nature of some of these relationships, and problematizing that, as Buffy herself points out, that he is a person and he is flawed, and ultimately all of these episodes are building and recurring the fractal point that Angel is also going to be someone who is capable of evil.
Yeah, so definitely the kind of the black-white morality stuff just is breaking away quite quickly in the show, in the sense that first in the last episode you got that lots of that grey area kind of morality being introduced, and now you see the character who is the paragon of goodness, who is Giles. He's the paragon of structure and adulthood. You see that being heavily problematized and greyed, I suppose.
And it introduces quite a lot of necessary shifting power dynamic into the episode as well, because Buffy has to take the lead on certain investigations. She has to push through and do things where Giles is actively resisting her doing so, and it's actually probably the first time he's outright rude to her and tells her basically to get the hell away from his private life. And she has to lead, at one point in the episode she leads the patrol on the Meals on Wheels delivery, where basically all the blood for the month is being delivered to the hospital and the vampires are coming along, and she has to take the point on that. So it's very much about this kind of exchange of, once again, kind of power and maturity, and where her role as a Slayer gives her a certain authority and certain legitimacy that otherwise wouldn't allow for that kind of relationship between a 16-year-old and an adult. And you see it in kind of small ways in the episode as well. It's very much how Willow has opportunity to kind of come to the fore in leadership roles a bit more, in terms of helping, and there's a story seed planted there where she's helping Jenny out with the computer class.
Yeah.
And when everyone else has kind of gone to pot, she takes control of the Scoobies, because Buffy and Giles aren't there to do it, and she's quite forceful about it, so it's giving her an opportunity to grow in that way as well.
You're not wrong. One of the things I was reading was that it's potential, someone read Igon, the word, as being Igon, like I-G-O-N-E, as in like, and the suggestion there being that the person is consumed or that they've let themselves go. And if we see that as such, you kind of can see Giles going through the same kind of movement that Buffy goes through later on in the season. So Buffy, or Giles, letting himself be all consumed by this demon and by the demon's implications on his own life, in terms of how he stops caring about everything. It becomes he has a bit of a lost weekend, as Buffy puts it. It can be that's reflected in how Buffy approaches, or what happens to Buffy later on in the season when Angel loses his soul, that she becomes consumed by the relationship, and that changes everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what that adds to the relationship between Buffy and Giles is it adds such an interesting texture to why he pushes her, because fundamentally, what we learn and reiterate about Giles' background is that he had, as you said, he had a destiny too. He was destined to be a watcher. His father and both of his aunts and his family going back generations were watchers, and he had his prophecy girl moment, and he very, very much said no and rang and caused a lot of damage to people by not being able to stand up to his responsibility,
and killed one of his friends
and caused one of his friends' death. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Buffy is able to do, which marks her as a hero in the way that simply being the Slayer doesn't, because many Slayers don't have that strength necessarily of conviction. It's actually interesting.
It calls back to Joyce in episode 3 or whatever, School Hard, where she...
Episode 3 of this season.
Yeah, exactly, where she basically says, I'm not leaving Buffy on her own, and when she goes back and fights Spike with Buffy, it's that moment of heroism that isn't based on your powers or what you can do. It's about making an active choice about what you're going to do. And if we're talking about active choices and existentialism, which we were last episode and we could apply here, then a really important thing to note is Hamlet.
Which Giles obviously alludes to.
Yeah, in the opening scene when Giles and Buffy are training and they have the music and they're playing really awful music, and Buffy's aerobicizing, Buffy turns it off and Giles says, and the rest is silence, which is the last thing that Hamlet says in Hamlet. So Hamlet is a hugely existential text. There's lots of existential themes in it. Most importantly, to be or not to be. That's a very, very important existential idea. So
I'm pretty sure the line is to be or not to be. That is the question. I think you misquoted it there.
Sorry, yeah. So that's very heavily influenced existential thought over the years. Sartre wrote a big thing about, I think it was Sartre, about Sisyphus and the decision to, the myth of Sisyphus, I think was the essay, but it was like the decision to exist or not. And that's also a very heavy theme in The Outsider or the whatever, L'étranger. I never know how people actually translate that, but
I thought it was The Stranger.
The Stranger, The Outsider, The Foreigner. There's loads of different ways to translate it, and no one's consistent about it. So Hamlet, no doubt what's happening here is that Giles is playing the role of Hamlet in this episode. He can't make a decision. He's immobilized by indecision, which is obviously Hamlet's fatal flaw. Being unable to make a choice and being unable to attribute values to things, it creates him to spiral into a alcohol-fueled like bender where he can't actually help the people around him.
Yeah, I think one of the things we know about that scene where Buffy is aerobicizing, and therefore they can't hear Giles' friend Philip trying to get in and escape their weird other friend who's turned into an Igon zombie.
Deirdre. It's spelled wrong though.
It's so odd because it's spelled, when it's written down in the episode, it's spelled D-I-E-D-R-E.
Yeah.
But they pronounce it D3 or Dree, or they're not just saying Deirdre, which is what the name is.
Deirdre, yeah, which is an Irish name.
Yeah, but it's just this constant not misappropriation, but misliteration of it. Yeah,
it's stupid.
But anyway, one thing I noted was basically this guy isn't safe because Buffy's doing her step aerobics, so she's kind of responsible for that. It's,
I just thought that, yeah.
More so than most human decks. It was kind of her fault there,
At the same time, that wasn't a time that she could necessarily expect someone to come knocking on the door needing help.
But the camera is telling us that if she hadn't have been playing that music, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
And the music which you picked up on is...
I didn't pick up on that. I read the Wikipedia entry about it.
Well, which you confirmed is a weirdly kind of dance beat 90s-ified version of the instrumental track of 39 Lashes from Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
Which we've verified through primary research.
We did indeed.
And I'm not sure if you were this, but Anthony Steele's Heg, his older brother Murray Head, wrote a couple of songs for Jesus Christ Superstar. Most famously known for writing one of the songs in Jesus Christ Superstar, and also a song from Chess, which is a musical which you're quite a fan of.
I am not a fan of Chess, no.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought it was
my dad loves Chess.
Maybe it's your dad.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm not sure why he even knows about Chess, but whenever it used to come on, the music video for it, which was really awful and had lots of weird CGI, but whenever that used to come on when I was like a teenager, my dad was like, yeah, Chess, great musical. So the musicals my dad likes include Chess, War of the Worlds, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah, but Anthony Steele Heg's brother for the original studio album wrote some of the songs.
Very good. There you go. So
tidbit.
Yeah. Are we including that as like an intentional reference by the Buffy crew, or?
I think Buffy is so, we're reconstructing Buffy it's almost an archaeological thing because it's so poorly documented in some ways because it's a TV show in the 90s that we'll never know. But all we can say is these things exist somewhere in relation to each other, and that's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Oh, another thing actually about the Hamlet reference is that apparently it's also said by Buffy and Merrick in the Buffy movie.
Oh, so really?
Obviously Joss Whedon got that line in because we all know Joss Whedon loves his Shakespeare. Actually, I have a question for you. So, remember Flatliners?
I do.
Did you get Flatliners vibes off this?
Yes, I did. The
idea of putting someone into a deep sleep and bring them back and them having a euphoric high.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things about this episode that gave me that vibe, and it's also something about shooting LA at night. It always feels a little bit like you're pretending it's nighttime. I don't know why. But
Flatliners was a 1991, I want to say, movie with Kiefer Sutherland and Julia Roberts, I think. No, it wasn't Julia Roberts. Someone like that.
It was one of those films we watched.
Michelle Pfeiffer, maybe. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, it was one of those films we watched where I kept falling asleep every for 4 seconds every 3 minutes and a half when we watched it because I was just quite tired. So I have a really frenzied recollection of it.
It's a very frenzied movie. They're college students. Kevin Bacon actually is in it, but they're college students who put each other into who basically
They're
kill each other,
yeah,
and bring themselves back to life, basically. And in the time that they die, they go insane, or they get broken and they get haunted, kind of. I don't know. It's a fucking mess of a movie.
But yeah, no, this had a classic Twilight Zone, Flatliners, just something anthology kind of feeling about it, where it was in a town not too different from yours, in a future 20 minutes from now. It was that kind of thing. And I think the other thing what the English element brings into it, which I found very reminiscent, was of M.R. James, in terms of who will be a very quintessential English writer of ghost stories, and probably a lot of what you, dear listener, would know of the traditional ghost story aesthetic will be M.R. James.
I actually haven't read any M.R. James.
So the basic, and I'm just going to quote here, but the basic Jamesian qualities of a ghost story are a characterful setting in an English village, seaside town, or country estate, an ancient town in France, or a venerable abbey or university, or in this context a library, or a gothic apartment in a dimly lit apartment.
Sure.
The other element is a nondescript or rather naive gentleman scholar as a protagonist, often of a reserved nature. So someone who is susceptible to the cosmic.
Sure.
And the discovery of an old book or other antiquarian object that somehow unlocks or at least attracts the unwelcome attention of a supernatural menace, usually from beyond the grave.
Okay, interesting.
So the low stakes of this episode in some way, like a couple of English people come along and turn into puddles, and then someone gets possessed and acts weirdly sexual and then dies. Like, that's all that happens in some ways. There's no big prophecy ending. It's all personal. And it's all that ghost story quality of, I heard the tapping at the window during the storm, and then we found him the next day hung in the closet by his belt. It's that kind of really gothic, really dark vibe to it, which I find is actually quite well carried in this episode. I do feel it feels spooky. It's a spooky episode.
It is a bit of a spooky episode. Tanya Krzyzewinska, who I was talking about last week, who wrote that essay about just generally about morality in Buffy and McCayanism, but she actually said that this episode is similar to Night of the Demon, which is a 1958 movie, a British movie about demons and stuff, which I've obviously never seen. I don't know anything about. But apparently it does connect it to, or it's quite Aleister Crowley-ish. That also links into the whole kind of occult sect of weird 20 and 30-year-olds who think that they're magicians in Britain and stuff. So it's pretty interesting. And then all the which, did you know that Yeats was a big seance guy as well?
No, I don't think I did know that.
Yeah, Yeats was big into the occult. Anyway, cool.
Well, Night of the Demon, which I looked at because you recommended the kind of connection here. But
well, I by recommend, I mean I just shopped out some of my research to you. I was just just read about this, will you please? Yeah,
and I did, but this is unrelated, obviously thematic synergy, but it's based on an M.R. James story called The Casting of the Runes. It is, yeah. So that's Jamesian aesthetic and that whole occult thing.
Do you want to watch that?
I would absolutely watch that. I read a bit about it, and it sounds crazy.
Batshit
absolutely batshit. And I love a nice classic batshit horror story.
Yeah, me too. And here, listener person, if you want to watch a really good 1950s, 60s batshit crazy horror movie, go watch The Haunting of Hill House, which I think is just called The Haunting, but from the 60s, because it's relevant because there's a recent TV show about The Haunting of Hill House.
Have we not talked about The Haunting of Hill House?
We haven't, no. Okay. But it's a fascinating TV show. It was Netflix original. It had a great, I'd say, 3 episodes in the show. The middle episode was 4 back-to-back continuous shots, and then normal TV from that point on, and that was stunning. It was so well choreographed. It was beautiful. But then the last episode I thought was total trash. So go watch it and let me know what you think. But the book, the Shirley Jackson book that it's based on, is incredible. It's my favorite horror book that's not The Haze of Leaves.
You think Shirley Jackson, didn't you?
Shirley Jackson, yeah. Shirley Jackson was a wild character, absolutely wild author. But and then there was a 60s movie based on it, which is stunning, incredibly watchable, incredibly disturbed, and very faithful to the book. And then there's a 90s movie, which is maybe the worst horror movie I've ever seen, but also the best, because it has Liam Neeson and Catherine Zeta-Jones and Owen Wilson in this mental, insanely large CGI house where they get haunted by demons, kind of, not really, ghosts.
It's a very strange adaptation, because the premise of Hill House is that it's meant to be like a very large gothic house, but a believable house that could be built by rich people in like plantation-y times or whatever.
Yeah, and importantly, like a couple of scary rooms, not a maze.
In the Owen Wilson film, it's just being very Americanized in a bad way. Like the doors, which are supposedly doors that people will use, are legitimately 35 feet high. It's like they're filming Honey, I Shrunk the Ghosts. There's a
if you put like a bunch of hobbits and Gandalf at the front with a torch, you'd believe they were walking through the mines of Moria.
Absolutely.
In that house.
There's a fireplace, which the fireplace is about the size of our entire apartment. It's just bizarre, and but in doing so, like the set is like a bizarre masterpiece. It's an absolute Chili Pepper inspired, Johnny Cash fever dream.
It is, yeah.
And someone put a lot of work into that, and people have to go and film this. And also, spoilers, at one point someone's head gets knocked off
by a lion head
yeah.
statue thing that swings out of the fireplace. It's amazing.
But what M.R. James does, and what the Good Haunting of Hill House does, and what this episode does, is harkens back to a time when horror and ghost stories didn't have to be jump scares. Sometimes they were continually exposed tension.
Turn of the Screw, obviously being another example.
Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which is
different James,
which is a kind of a, you can't say anything about Turn of the Screw because it's a very strange story, but it's you can't study English or teach any kind of English literature without having your own pet theory about what's actually happening in Turn of the Screw.
And it's one of those amazing texts where you'll never have enough information to be able to determine any way what's actually happened, but you get just enough information that you feel like maybe you could. And
like everyone will say, there's a straight up ghost story, that nothing is happening, that the person, the narrator, is unreliable and unwell, that the children in it are actually incredibly psychosexual thing. Like it's every possible I'm convinced like it's the English literature version of like the Aristocrats. Yeah. Where the joke is everyone knows that nothing is actually happening in it to some degree, but people have given lectures, written papers, books about these bizarre.
It's about 100 pages long as well. It's a short book.
Yeah, it's bizarre interpretations. But anyway,
the thing that actually reminds me of is one of my favorite things I learned doing English in college was the first course I did in college was Theories of Literature, which was an incredible course. I wish I could go back and take it again, because we went through structuralism, new criticism, post-structuralism, and then into feminism, pop psychologies, or sorry, not pop psychology, pop culture studies, Freudian theory, and all this stuff. It was amazing. But one of the things they had you read on it was they got you to buy a specific version of The Dead by James Joyce, and in that, some people had written essays to read The Dead through the lens of 5 different critical theories. So one of them was formalism, one of them was feminism, one of them was Freudian theory, one of them was Marxist theory, and I can't remember what the fifth one was. But basically, it was 5 different people interpreting this incredibly malleable, incredibly well-written text, which is The Dead, which is incredible. It's probably the best short story ever written through those viewpoints, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah, and I have fond memories of that Theories of Literature reader. But specifically, and it's funny that you mentioned that today, because while I was working in work today on a Sunday, RIP me, I was wandering around this like postgraduate PhD study rooms in work, and it's all open plan. People just leave their books and their novels out while they're working, going crazy on their PhD. So I just wandering around seeing what books people had on their desks. And someone who was working on a very complex PhD was still using that Theories of Literature reader that we bought, which you could like kill a man stone dead with.
I can see it right now. It's a huge fucking enormous white book. Yeah. It's great, yeah.
But something else I thought was interesting about this episode in terms of that ghost story tradition is, I was reading recently about how the average shot length in filmmaking has gotten shorter. Say from 1930s, it was the average shot was about 12 seconds long, and now these days it's about 3.5 seconds long.
Yeah, this was the article you sent me about Us, wasn't it? And the split diopter shot.
About the film Us, yeah.
Yeah. And what I thought was really nice about the average scene length, little bit there, was that shot length, was that average scene length of 3 seconds. But
that's taken 3.
That's actually any Ryan Murphy property. But the interesting thing about that, and shot length being how long a camera shot lasts before it breaks away to another shot. What was really interesting about that was that they actually compared King Kong, the original, to the King Kong 2013
remake.
Or 2005? Anyway, the remake basically, and compared that like directly to show how the shot length has changed. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's basically exporting the tradition of long exposure to create tension and horror rather than quick disjointedness, which is how a lot of modern horror translates itself. And I think that's very embedded in what they're doing here in the Dark Age. There's a creeping dread and very little actual
visible
action or visible demon stuff. It's really just the shuffling of something slowly and inexorably towards your front door, which is a very well revitalized horror like It Follows has engaged with very well. That kind of thing of that the horror isn't sometimes waiting to see what the monster is, it's knowing what's coming for you.
Yeah, no doubt. So one of the things of this episode, I think I'd just be remiss if I didn't note this, is that it plays with the themes of adulthood that occur consistently through Buffy quite well. So it basically says that the growth towards adulthood, which is the fear of what that the vampires represent, it's kind of Buffy's overall journey, that it is messy and complicated, and that you're taking on more and more messiness, I suppose, or complication into your life the older you grow, that you don't know things more for certain, you just are able to deal with things better. And I think that's this was an important addendum to that, is that Buffy sees Giles as a human, as she puts it, as opposed to just an adult or grown up, I think she says. Yeah, no,
I agree, and I think that it's a very vital thing to do, because they've established a character in Giles that works, and it would be very easy to rely on that. But what makes these characters lived in and useful ciphers for all these themes is by making them real people. And you show with Giles, anyone can say someone used to do something when they're 21 and now they don't do it. But this episode really lives that. It really expresses it in an authentic way rather than just name checking it. And shows evolution that really establishes Buffy, the show, with the fact that people are always moving forward. That you might enjoy season 2 of Buffy, but it will not be the same very soon. And season 3 will come in season 4 and so on and so forth. And it builds that into the characters. And with that, Buffy's narrative is constantly adding these little bits of having to hold these moments of childhood and these moments of adolescence, cherish them and then let them go. And I think her seeing that Giles was once 21 studying history at Oxford and then disappeared to London and made all these poor choices, as Buffy will do herself, will reach that point where she disappears and becomes Aang for a while, and it's all part of that journey for her. You're absolutely right. Do you want to talk about weird gender stuff in this episode? Yeah, I just thought that there was some weird side notes, but repeated side notes about gender conversations. So there's things like when Ethan is being confronted by Buffy and she's supposedly protecting him, he talks about, oh, look at you, you're so, look who's getting all manly here defending me, Ethan speaking to Buffy, and Buffy's like, well, it's definitely not you, so I'm going to defend you. And then as he lets her go first, he says, oh, well, ladies first, and then knocks her out. And he also earlier in the episode says that she looked great in the dress, which I thought was a feat moment. Yeah, well, I think Ethan is quite clearly coded as queer. Yeah. In a way that, to be honest, I never really thought about. When I used to think about this character, I see his character, well, I look at it now, it's like, oh, well, they're writing a gay character or a bisexual character. That's just what's happening here. Yeah. Otherwise, there's stuff like when Igon, which is portrayed as a male demon, a very dominating and specifically very sexual demon, is possessing Jenny. It speaks with a deeper voice and says things to Giles like, was it good for you? Which is the classic. They always go for that line in every TV show, every episode ever is, was it good for you too? Whenever there's any sexual demon stuff. Yeah, which is such a natural thing for anyone to say. And it says things like, oh, Ripper, you're acting like such a woman. Yeah. Which, obviously the you cry at every funeral was the next line. Yeah, and the contrast there is meant to be we're seeing someone who is traditionally a woman, Jenny, saying these things, and it's very domineering, masculine way. So they're introducing a lot of gender and sexual energy almost recklessly into this episode, because they talk a lot about the orgies that they had, and I think that, to be honest, Igon, being shared amongst all these people and then jumping from person to person has an element of promiscuity to it, very much so. Oh yeah, I think they're tying very bacchanalian, and very much tying this era of Giles' life where he was presumably using a lot of recreational drugs, kind of very uninhibited in the 70s.
He had the body of Sid Vicious at the time, so that helped him as well.
Yeah, they Photoshop his Anthony Stewart's head onto what is very much looks like Sid Vicious's head.
Oh, it is. It is Sid Vicious's body. Okay, yeah.
Very good. So there's all that, and then you see kind of a more toxic, unsurprisingly, even more toxic example of that, where Xander is just constantly angry at Cordelia the whole way through this episode. But at one point, because I noticed it because we're having all these other specifically gender-driven comments, he says something along the lines of, "I don't care if he's girl, I still want to beat her up," or something.
Yeah, he's like, "I don't care that you're a woman. I will go to town on you, and I will, let's square up."
Yeah.
And Cordelia is like, "I've seen you fight. I'm not that worried."
Yeah. And then in possibly the same scene, I losing track of my chronology there, or soon after, Ethan tries to escape and Xander is told to intercept him and gets pushed out of the way, and then Cordelia kicks Ethan in the knees and incapacitates him.
That's actually an earlier scene, but yeah.
But the linkage is there anyway.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
So yeah, it's such a... If you want to write a good or an interesting story for me, take a weird ghost story and put a lot of weird gender and sexual elements into it and just shake them up like it's a bag of popcorn and you're trying to get all the salt on it. You know what I mean? That's what I feel about this, is that I don't think they're necessarily trying to make any point, but they're charging it like static electricity with all this just gender mess.
I mean, like, if you even look at, there's lots of weird, uncomfortable sexual chatter between Giles and Jenny. So at the beginning of the episode, they're talking about, or Jenny's like, "Oh, you wanted to go out? I was thinking of staying in." And Giles is like, "Oh," because and then she slags him over an E.M. Forrester book, which I have to presume is Morris, or Maurice, anyway.
I think Maurice.
Okay, let's say Maurice, yeah. She's slagging him about how she destroyed the book, basically, and she's like, "I just wanted to watch you squirm," and he says something like, "I hope I gave good squirm," and stuff like this, and it's all very loaded sexually and uncomfortable. And then the Buffy and the Scoobs talk about how
imagining them getting together
and stuff. So it's all about having to look at adults as being sexual beings and stuff like this. And then when Giles takes Jenny back to his apartment after she gets knocked out, she's like trying to ride him and stuff, and he's like, "I don't want to take advantage of you," and stuff like this. And it's all, you're absolutely right. I mean,
it's a very moist episode.
It's a moist episode. It's very, it doesn't try to use sexual themes necessarily, but it uses sex and heady themes or heady notes as one of the paints with which it colours the episode, which I think is definitely a great way to do it.
Yeah, it's an accelerant, and I think they talk a lot specifically about the euphoria and the headiness that the people who were marked with Igon's mark experienced, and I think they're just introducing this soup of hormones to everything.
Yeah. I've got you under my skin.
Got you on my skin, definitely. And it's very... it's notable because they actually, like, we've close read this so much, they don't talk like that in other episodes. They don't make any kind of sexual innuendo, or if they do, it's very PG-13, and there was some of this stuff that was a bit very on the nose. Yeah,
I actually think that they probably do a good bit of, I think they're probably more racy than we remember in the show generally, especially when it comes to like them actually starting to hook up with people as they get a bit older.
Oh no, I mean specifically up until now.
Oh sure, that was
a departure.
That was definitely the most sexual episode. Also proceeded in the last episode with Buffy accidentally talking about masturbation. So one of the sad parts about this episode is that this episode really does mark the end of Giles and Jenny having a significant relationship. If I remember correctly, they never really quite pick it back up again. Like, in Passions, where Giles comes into his apartment and he thinks that Jenny's waiting for him.
Yeah,
I think he feels like, oh great, we've finally reconciled after this has happened.
Yeah.
So the halcyon days of their relationship has just passed, if I remember correctly. That's quite sad. I
have a note in my notes to say, poor sad Giles.
Yeah.
I mean, it is sad. It's one of the really great tragedies of the show. I think the only thing up there otherwise is really Tara and Willow for me.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
There are other sad things that happen for sure. But this is, it's just unfair.
It is. It's deeply mean. I remember, it's not good.
But it's a great example of how something can feel unfair, but good writing.
Yeah.
And how something can be unearned. We're looking at you, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Jesus. I mean, is Jenny Calendar fridged at that point? I think Tara is genuinely fridged in season 6. but I'm not sure if Jenny Calendar is frigid here in season 2. I think it has a genuine advancement in the sense that it's genuinely something that would happen. Angel is a vicious, and Jealous is a vicious character.
Yeah.
And he absolutely would do that. It doesn't just feel like something that happened because it advanced a storyline. In fact, it kind of interrupts storylines, and it doesn't really advance Giles' storyline. It just makes him sad.
Yeah.
So
And I think if you balance that correctly, you can find a way that you've basically built a character up enough that it matters when something happens to them. But I agree with you. I think it's a weird one with Tara and Willow because obviously they are gay, and it introduces a couple of different elements to it. I think we'll have to examine that more when we get to it and see how we
killing
feel
your
about it.
gays is definitely something that happens there. Anyway,
I wouldn't write that today, basically.
no, yeah. One quick note I have, I think then we can start wrapping up, is
Get to the dusting.
the dusting, the goo.
No, we decided last week that the wrap
Oh,
up
the
is going to be called
dusting.
the dusting.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. Is the Lost Weekend is referenced. So Buffy says that Giles is lost weekending himself.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that the Lost Weekend is the originator of that scene where someone is walking drunk through town and seeing all the neon signs around and having them pass by him in a blur, basically.
I've always wondered what that was from.
That's the Lost Weekend.
So, most often and frequently used in The Simpsons.
Simpsons, yeah, no
there's
doubt.
Various variations on that.
It often takes the same space in my brain as the scene from Midnight Cowboy. You know, the everybody's talking about you.
Yeah.
Where he's walking through the town and everyone's being mean to him and stuff in New York City for the first time. Which Midnight Cowboy, great movie. You know that actually it was the only X-rated movie to ever win the Best Picture in the Oscars.
Oh, really?
The X rating wasn't there for very long, but it actually came along right after the first ever, I want to say Universal or G movie won Best Picture in the Oscars, which was Oliver. So Oliver won Best Picture and then Midnight Cowboy. And it was kind of like, very opposite directions.
Absolutely. So one of the things I thought was just in terms of smaller Buffy bits about the episode, I felt that Ethan was very, very much like Loki.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't throw out MCU comparisons willy-nilly, but I did feel like a similar energy there in terms of just how he's portrayed. And I also felt that scene where he's like skulking around the library and pushes a bookcase on Buffy was just decidedly camp.
Yeah, I agree.
In the theatrical sense.
Not in the Met Gala sense then.
Not in the Met Gala sense, no. But it's very much like if that was released today, he would have had some lying about, sorry Buffy, the library is permanently shut down. And
shut the fuck up.
Drop the bookcase on him. Okay.
I have something to note, which is that tattoo is just the Prince symbol, right?
Yeah, so the Mark of Igon itself is a terrible, terrible tattoo, and it does look very much like the symbol for the artist formerly known as Prince, and who's now currently known as Prince.
He's currently known as nothing. He's now dead.
People still have identities when they're dead.
No, they don't. The thing that's important there as well is that we looked it up while we were watching the episode, and there are people who got that Mark of Igon tattoo on their actual skin. What's wrong with you?
Now, we have to be careful here, Brian, because the statistical likelihood is that if anyone is going to have it, it's going to be one of our listeners. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, true. Jesus.
I'm just going to say, if you're going to have a Buffy tattoo, make sure it's a really good one. Make sure you're really happy with it.
What Buffy tattoo would you get?
Probably Willie the Snitch's face across my shoulder blades.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'd get a stake in my forearm, so it looks like I always have a stake up my sleeve.
Very good. I'd say some people have the angel tattoo.
Yes.
The A for angel. They has on his back.
The griffin, yeah.
The griffin, yeah.
It's possible. I think having Sarah Michelle Gellar's face up on your stomach would be pretty good too.
I think it would be disrespectful to her somehow.
Oh, you know what? I guarantee someone has the angel burnt cross scar on their chest.
Absolutely.
And I want to meet that person.
A couple other things I noticed was that the library has a book scanner in it to make sure you don't steal books, basically.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Which is intense. And that none of the Igonian zombies were dead hands.
Yeah, you were saying that to me during the episode. Their hands were all fleshy
face.
pink. Yeah.
Also, I always remember that scene where he forcibly tattoos the mark Ethan does onto Buffy and then burns his own mark off with sulfuric acid. I always remember it's just weirdly intense and torturous.
Yeah.
Unnecessary. It's one of the horrific scenes that stuck out to me about Buffy before I met you, basically, in that interim years between when I watched it and when I knew you. I was like, it was just something really horrible about it.
I actually had forgotten about it completely until I watched this episode. One thing to note, Gavin Rossdale being referenced in this episode, disgusting.
As an attractive person. Yeah,
Gavin Rossdale was from Bush, which is the most mediocre 90s kind of post-grunge band that you could possibly have. Bush were shit. And he then went ahead and married Gwen Stefani. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they're married anymore. So...
Yeah, and then otherwise I would say in terms of fashion, in terms of Scoob's fashion and Scoob adjacent people, it was fairly okay, but I actually felt that every one of Giles' friends, except for Ethan, was dressed so terribly and so like, here's what we have off the rack for the extras, basically. There was his friend Philip was wearing a suit that was about 7 sizes too big for him. There was his friend Didydri, who was ostensibly the same age as Giles and was dressed in a weird turtleneck and pearl necklace of a woman in her 80s.
Yeah.
And it was your man, the main zombie, was carrying a metal briefcase everywhere for no distinct reason.
Yeah.
It was all very odd.
But Xander's wearing a nice enough jumper. Way too big, but a nice enough jumper. Willow at one point is wearing a green and blue, which is a very dodgy combination of colours, but fluffy jumper dress. Mm-hmm. Very confusing. And as I noted earlier, Jenny Calendar's fringe is looking a bit better these days, which is positive.
Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of ongoing arcs, does Giles get knocked out?
I was going to ask you, does he get knocked out?
I don't think he gets knocked out. Jenny obviously gets knocked out. In terms of ongoing arcs, there's a real development here for Cordelia, because it's really the first time that she
offers help. She says, I care about Giles, what can I do? And Buffy's actually like confused about why she's there, because they hadn't asked her to be there, but she's becoming more integrated part of the Scoobies, to the extent that she actually brings her clairvoyant powers to bear, because they establish a scene where she walks in on Giles talking to the homicide detectives, so that later on the Scoobs have a reason to find out that he was talking to murder cops. And the only issue is that she says that she heard them talking about homicide, but she actually walked into the library after they stopped talking about that, so it's just a complete discontinuity. Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Okay, so do you want to do death count? I actually have it open in front of me. Do you want me to do it?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so Randall, killed in a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
You have Thomas Sutcliffe, who's killed and possessed by Egon, but it's only
crossed
mentioned.
Off a list, yeah.
Yeah. DD Page, who is killed and possessed by Egon. Philip Henry, who's killed and possessed by Egon. 2 unidentified vampires outside of the Sunnydale Hospital. Oh, yeah. And then Egon himself.
So the vast majority of those were basically members of Giles' inner circle who were killed by Egon.
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing there as well is that apparently Egon is canonically not killed. Apparently, when he jumps out of the Angel, in the comic books he comes back because he jumped into a rat on the floor and managed to survive that way.
Makes sense to me.
And apparently it's the first or maybe only retconning that happens in the Buffy comic books. Like, if people come back in them, it's because they're resurrected and shit.
Yeah, most people go through death and come out the other side, essentially.
Exactly, whereas this guy is just like, oh no, he actually survived.
It's actually something we didn't mention, I just should touch on briefly, is that the resolution of the episode is a piece of lore that I always remember quite clearly. So basically, Egon is forced to jump into any near dead thing, so they force him to jump into Angel, who's dead as being a vampire, and the demon Egon fights with the demon, that the vampire part of Angel, and eventually the demon Angel wins. But it's just interesting because it adds to this conflicting view of how demonic are the vampires.
Yeah.
Because
Angel has a great line, obviously, which I'm trying.
Yeah, he basically says that, the demon needed a vessel, but he already has a demon and has been raring for a fight for 200 years.
Yeah.
But it's very much one of the core episodes that forms the thesis of that vampires are essentially just a form of demon that possesses the body when they vampirize them, whereas in other versions of the lore, they kind of present it more as it's kind of still the person to some degree, and their worst instincts come out.
I think it's in season 5 or 6 or so that they do discuss in depth what the implications of what vampires are. That they were the first demon, and they've basically combined with humans, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah, but even into Angel, they have episodes where they essentially split Angel's psyche. So within his like dreamscape, there's both Angel,
and Angelus and
Liam kind of speaking to each other, and this it problematizes it even further, because which part of it, and then there's a whole plot where Angelus is able to remember something that no one else in the world can, because he didn't technically exist when it was erased from memory.
Is this in the comics?
No, this is the whole thing in Angel, where the reason they bring Angelus back to fight the Beast, which is the big demonic devil-looking guy who's actually a front for Jasmine, who is...
And you mean bring back as in season 3?
No, this wouldn't be season 3.
No, but they bring him back. Like the powers that be bring him back in season 3 from the dead. Is that what you mean by bring him back?
No, I mean an Angel.
Okay.
When they magically remove Angel's soul to bring Angelus back into play
getcha.
To interrogate him. They do this because he has knowledge that no one else has because he didn't exist. He was dead at the time. So, but that basically says that
Angelus wasn't within Angel at the time.
Angel is not Liam, but he's also not Angelus, and Angelus is dead rather than in the. So my point is just that this whole lore is really thorny about what the actual vampire is, which is problematic because it's the core thesis of this theme of the show. So
yeah. Okay, I'll give you one more note before we move on to the rating. Giles says at one point, it's not music, it's just meaningless sound. And to me, being a complete nerd, that very much called into mind Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow for Macbeth, which is another great Macbeth existential moment, because it's a sound and fury signifying nothing kind of stuff. So anyway,
as a nerd, how did you feel about him saying that real music was the Bay City Rollers?
Didn't like it. Didn't like it at all. No.
Not a BCR fan?
No, not quite. Bay City Rollers, didn't they play Monica and Chandler's wedding?
Possibly. The only music I remember from Friends, which is a terrible show about transphobes and homophobes, is they were really into Hoogie and the Blowfish.
Yeah. Hoogie and the Blowfish did not make its way over to the UK and Ireland.
Okay. Yeah.
I do not know any Hoogie and the Blowfish, anything.
There's a couple of things in Friends that convince you are things you should have liked because they were so adamant about it, and now you're like, no, these are the most like milk toast white,
like they're really
upper class.
They really want to go to see a Broadway show at one point called Stomp, I think.
Stomp or Clomp or Clash
or
or some other piece of crap
or something like that. And they're like, yeah, I can't wait to go see Stomp this week. And that is not a known musical. No one gives a shit about that. Anyway, okay, do you have your rating ready?
Do you?
I do.
Okay, I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to say that I enjoyed this episode. I think it was well written-ish, but I think plotting and structure and likability was missing from it to some degree. I think it was interesting in the way that you've highlighted, but for me, it probably just doesn't represent the highs that this season comes to. So I'm going to give it a 6.9 bacchanals out of 10.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with you. I think that it is a standalone episode in some ways. That does a decent job of propelling some subplots forward, but it's just an interesting Monster of the Week episode. And
what's interesting actually as well is that it's actually not all that standalone. It's so heavily connected to Halloween that it pales in comparison for me.
Yeah, but I think it manages to broadcast a standalone vibe despite all the obvious connections.
Yeah.
Anyway, the rating I would give it is 7 Daedries out of 10.
Beautiful.
Because I think it's no more than a 7. I have a lot of affection for it. It touches a lot of my pet themes, but it's not the best episode. But what I will say is, and we haven't said this yet, Anthony Stewart Head acting chops. He gives a whole different range on Giles in this episode. He's tortured 5 o'clock shadow, and he does great. And I could just watch him. I could watch him just drinking coffee. Maybe they could do an ad campaign about that.
No, I totally agree. And this, we have to note this episode heavily informs Giles' character for the whole rest of the show.
Absolutely.
This is in the background of Giles' character for the whole rest. And we see him in Band Candy coming as Ripper.
Yeah.
It's great.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap it up there. So, well done us. It's a Sunday. We recorded fucking Buffy even after you worked. So, wow.
I did. I could take a 5-minute nap after we watched the episode before we did this. So I'm really powering through.
Yeah, good job, you. Let's have beers later, I think.
I will drink beer.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much for listening. We enjoy your patronage. Hit us up on Patreon.
Oh yeah, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/everypornstar.
Did you ever think it was really stupid the way, like, it's like, be a patron on our Patreon? Like, what's the...
Patron on our Patreon?
Is
Patreon is it a Pokemon maybe? Isn't that one of the Eevee evolutions? Patreon?
I don't know. I'm not very familiar with Pokemon.
But that's a joke. It absolutely isn't. But they're all called Eon.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the real gaps in my knowledge. But I read a thing the other day where it's like, if you ever want to get on Patreon at a reasonable price tier, set up a shit one now, and then because...
Yeah, they're introducing insane rules soon.
And I thought about it, and I thought, I will never, ever care. And I was like, it's good to know that. And then I just, close that tab.
Yeah, if you ever want to send us money, just send us to our fucking PayPal account. Thank you.
Or just do it. This is an Irish podcast. Just put it in a brown envelope and stuff it through a door. Okay, so thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Tell your friends, tell your pastor, and we will see you next week on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
Buff.
See yous.